Hi and welcome everyone. My name is Maureen Salo-Dombrowski and I work with Project GUTS in Santa Fe, New Mexico. In this video, we're going to explore computational science, a new type of science made possible by computers, and the impact it's having on our everyday lives. Computational science can be seen as the third leg of science in addition to theoretical and experimental science. It lies at the intersection of computer science, mathematics, and science. Computational science uses mathematics and computer science to model real-world problems and conduct simulation experiments. Computational science is made possible by the advent of powerful computers. Increases in computational power have enabled us to design and conduct experiments on models of systems that are too big, too expensive, or too dangerous to experiment with in the real world. Increased computational power allows us to run multiple what-if scenarios very quickly. We also collect and analyze large amounts of data produced by these models. But it is important to note that computational science does not replace traditional field experimentation. Each approach is appropriate in different situations. Computational science opens up new opportunities for problem solving and empowering students as scientists. We use the computational science cycle to describe the process used by computational scientists. We start by selecting a real-world problem or phenomenon we're interested in studying. Then we need to make a simplified version of the real world. Doing so produces an abstraction for a model. Next, we go from the abstract idea for a model to a computational model by representing the components and behaviors in terms of formal mathematics and algorithms. The next step is to translate the algorithms into a computer code. These 4 steps are called computer modeling. Finally, we run simulations using the computer model we created as an experimental testbed. Simulations run time forward as if we could speed up time to see how the future unfolds. During the simulation, we can produce and capture data. From these data, we draw conclusions and interpret if our model has any basis in reality. If the model reproduces some features of reality that we care about as compared to the real-world data, perhaps it can be used to help us understand or make predictions about the real world. Scientists and researchers use computer models to study a wide variety of phenomena. Let's hear from Melanie Moses. Melanie is a computer scientist and biologist. She uses computer simulations of ant colonies to study and design computer networks.
Professor in the Department of Computer Science here at UNM, and I also have an appointment in the Department of Biology. And I'm going to tell you about some research that we've been doing in my lab over the last couple of years using agent-based models, very much like the kinds of agent-based models that you all are learning to build. And we've used those models to study complex systems. And the systems we focus on are ant colonies and computer systems. And we learn a lot about each system by studying the other. So in our models, foragers are searching for food on a grid, and upon finding this food, they decide whether or not to return to where they went using site fidelity or to communicate using pheromones. And we use a technique called genetic algorithms to evolve the parameters of the model. So these, in other words, there are many different ways that the ants could behave, many different ways they could move, many different ways they could balance memory and communication. And our goal was to find the way that maximized the rate that seeds were collected in a fixed period of time. Okay, so we learned a great deal about what we think the ants in the field are doing and what good strategies for foraging collectively are. So we then wanted to take those strategies and do something with them. This was going to be sort of our final test about whether those strategies really worked. And so what we did is we took those strategies and we programmed them, we used them as the programs that govern swarms of robots. So we built these robots in our labs. These are robots controlled by iPhones. So there's an iPhone up here and a pretty simple motor and a few sensors. And these robots then, we send them out collectively. We have a group of 6 of them, and we send them out to forage using the behaviors that the ants have told us are good foraging behaviors. What I've told you about is kind of my belief that these computational and biological systems are both these kind of complex systems where you have interacting agents that are hooked together by networks of communication. And we can use computer science, we can use models to reveal how biological complex systems work. And on the other hand, we can go to biology and we can ask, how do distributed strategies work? In particular, these ants taught us that you can have a scalable distributed search mechanism by balancing individual memory with pheromone communication. And we were able to take that and put that into swarm robotics. So this is a case where we have mobile computers moving around, interacting with each other, that can now imitate the way that ants communicate with each other to achieve some task. And I think this sort of approach is important because as computer science, as computers become more and more internetworked, their interactions with humans, with each other, with the physical world, all introduce this new layer of complexity. And I think that biology has evolved many interesting solutions to these sorts of complex challenges. And so I'm hopeful that we actually will learn a great deal more about how to build computer systems by studying biological systems.
Stephen Guerin is a computational scientist who uses modeling and simulation to address public safety issues, such as emergency evacuation planning.
Hi, my name is Stephen Guerin. I'm working here in Santa Fe at a company called Redfish and another one called SimTable, where we're an applied complexity company, which is where we're taking ideas coming out of places like Santa Fe Institute, UNM, Los Alamos, and Sandia, looking at complex systems and finding applications to them in the real world. And some of the tools that we're using are things like agent-based modeling, which you're learning in tools like NetLogo, machine learning, machine vision, statistics and probability are kind of come together into ways that people can come around a physical interactive table to look at emergency management issues, like how will a fire spread, how will fluid move down in a dam break, what's the social side of an evacuation, who's going to shelter in place, who might evacuate, and also the traffic dynamics arising from these incidences. So instead of traditionally presenting our results up on a screen or on a wall, either on the laptop or on the wall, we're taking the same projector and projecting it down onto surfaces or around the room, and then making those surfaces interactive by watching that same surface with a camera. So this has nice challenges of how do you detect where a laser pointer is clicking on a very non-uniform surface and map that up to a projector, or how do I detect where somebody's hand is or their body is. So these are all nice problems in machine vision at the core of, I think, computer science today, and many applications in addition with simulation, big data and analytics, as well as machine learning. So what we have here up on the top, maybe out of frame as we pan over here, is we have a projector that it's just an off-the-shelf projector projecting on a table. We have a web camera and a Mac Mini bolted on the back, and that's the full extent of the computation that's going on. And we're projecting that down onto a table here, and we'll turn off the lights here so you can get a better view of it. And basically you're seeing the camera taking a picture of this table and reflecting these white borders back. So I don't know if you can see my hands in here or the laser pointer. And in the beginning you can see there's a little bit, well, first of all, the camera is upside down, flipped, and it's a wide angle, so the image is a little bowed. So the first algorithm we're going to do is we're going to take the projector space and convert the X and Y of the projectors into a binary code. And there's a particular kind of binary code called gray code that we're going to now come through and project that gray code of all the position coordinates and let the camera take a photo, and it's learning for every pixel in the camera its position in camera space, and then converting that to a projector space. So once the camera registers that, we're able to bring up GIS information. Right now the table is flat, and we're projecting the area of Santa Fe here, for instance. And we also have the ability to use my laser pointer and make the surface interactive. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put it into 3D scan mode, and I'm going to make some arbitrary hills. So imagine a firefighter wanted to train on how fire behaves when it's going through a valley or through a saddle point. And so we have the ability now to project some lines on the table, and this is a sinusoidal grayscale pattern. And based on how the stripes move and the displacement of the camera from the projector, there's enough information to recover the height of the sand. So that scanning process lets us now use that as a real information in a fire. The other way we like to use this is loading a known topography, like in Santa Fe. And let me turn off all these different layers for you first. And we start off with the colors of the rainbow. And we can also click on any one location in here and fly to that position in Google Earth. So now we're registered in GIS space. So what I'm going to do now with the colors of the rainbow is I'm going to move the sand from the low points, kind of the red points, and using the colors of the rainbow, Roy G. Biv, red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, and violet, we're going to make the terrain of Santa Fe. And I'll take my trusty piece of wood here and get the bulk of the sand to the east in Santa Fe, in the East Mountains. This is north on the table. I'm just going to bring the sand in here roughly, and then we'll do a little finer detail with the hands. So this is, so right now we're forming the ski basin. Here's the Santa Fe watershed coming down here with the McClure and Nichols Reservoir, Cerro Gordo. This is Hyde Park coming through here up to the ski basin. And this is Thompson Peak in the east. And so part of this is we call tangible computing. And it lets people kind of interact with a real surface and actually form the surface and get a little bit of muscle memory as people learn in different ways. Some people can just look at a contour map like an expert, but some people learn contours in a different way and elevation, and being able to form it with their hands has some advantage. So this is roughly Santa Fe with the mountains in the east. And now we can layer on different pieces of information. Here we're going to show, I'll turn on hill shading. So if you think of a raster or bitmap with elevations, we can look at every point on that patch, like if you're in that logo, and look at its 8 neighbors and figure out what direction that patch is facing. We call that aspect in GIS. And then we can color that or shade it based on where the sun is. So here I'll move the sun to the east or the west, and we can put a little bit more detail on here. The elevation data was coming from the USGS at a 10-meter resolution per pixel. We can now lay around things like the roads as a polyline, or as a structures, which are points, so these are the houses. And we can also come in and inspect certain areas. So I can say, well, what is the fuel or vegetation type in any one of these pixels? So it's like I'm inspecting a patch, and it's a patch variable. And that ultimately we're going to have a fire model on here that wants to move uphill, downwind. It'll be a function of the fuel type, as well as the strength and direction of the wind, which is a single vector here with the strength and direction of the wind indicated. So once we have this in here, while I was inspecting the patch layer, and we're showing elevation, but I can actually show the fuels layer also. So here's ponderosa pine, pinyon juniper, and grass and chamisa. And so once we have this loaded, I've got all the features necessary to light a fire, and having a biocellular automata model of how fire spreads. So let's put this guy into fire mode, and we can start up a fire maybe down near this kind of upper canyon and Cerro Gordo kind of intersecting here. And if you can see, it's maybe easier to see on the terrain view here. So we have a fire spread now that's a function of the direction of the wind and the slope. And I can speed up time, and we'll watch that thing spread. Or we can also simulate what if there was spotting behavior up on the hills as the wind is pushing it. And we can also think about the human response of where would I put maybe an air tanker to slow down the head of the fire, the direction in which it's going, which is a very dangerous place to put human resources, so we want to use our airplane to slow down the fire there. And we maybe put our humans with a hand crew at the heel or the base of the fire, away from, downhill and downwind, or upwind of the fire, excuse me. And these guys will have a certain production rate. Be easier to see if I turn off the roads here. And so these guys are making their line at a certain rate. We can also then introduce things like a bulldozer team, who might be a resource arriving later as the fire gets more progressed. But you can compare their progression rates to the hand crews over time. So they're able to dig a lot more line to contain this fire. So this is the physical aspect of a fire. We can also turn on the roads and the structures, and for every house we can simulate an evacuee, or in this case 1.5 evacuees per house, and start to look at where we'd expect congestion to be, So now we can have the fire service interacting with public safety or the police who are going to be in charge of the evacuation. Typically these guys train separately on their part of the problem. This lets them to come together around a common problem and deal with those issues. So this is a first instance of using agent-based modeling in the real world, kind of a new form of human-computer interaction that takes advantage of machine learning, simulation, and a lot of statistics. So think of this as new ways of solving problems. This is SimTable.
As we have seen, computational science is a new branch of science that integrates computational thinking and computing into the sciences. Scientists are using computer modeling and simulation to understand, predict, and prevent the daunting problems we face, such as climate change, loss of biodiversity, energy consumption, and epidemics.